Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's my final picks for week 19 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. We are talking playoffs, the wild card round, and we have several slates this weekend, so it is kind of confusing. I'm just going to break down all the games, the full 6-game slate. We have games ranging from Saturday to Monday this weekend, but I'll be talking about the entire weekend as a whole here, so it just doesn't get as confusing. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, I'm an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you sign over on Prize Picks, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100. When you use code Pennell and tell them I sent you. But I think it'll be up for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, you'll start with the quarterback position. And we're kind of loaded with just the playoffs. So obviously there's going to be a lot of good plays because all the best teams for the most part are in the playoffs. So obviously some of the best players are going to be in it, especially for fantasy purposes. So you're going to have a lot of options. I wouldn't say it's that easy building lineups. I mean, it's easy putting together lineups and getting good players in, but it's also not easy in the sense that you also feel like you're missing a lot of good players, even though you have a lot of good players in your lineup, if that makes any sense. And I have several quarterbacks left off here, like Josh Allen, Kyler Murray. If you want to play them, go for it, but I didn't want to talk about every single quarterback, so I just kind of put together my pool right now. I mean, obviously this can change a little bit by the time Saturday rolls around, but right now these are the guys I'm the most confident in. And just basing things off the matchups and prices and things like that. So start top, Patrick Mahomes facing Pittsburgh. They have not been that soft versus quarterbacks this season, but they're playing at home. They have the highest implied team total in the slate, currently just below 30 points, sitting at 29.5. They're 12.5 point favorites. Pittsburgh is pretty much, I would say, the weakest link in the playoffs right now, and I think the Chiefs will be able to handle them quite easily, and Mahomes should have just another day at the office. I think Tyreek Hill has a pretty good, solid game. I know he kind of screwed us all in the last week of the season, but was used sparingly, kind of injured his heel in pregame warmups. Assuming he is back to full health, hard not to like the Chiefs stacks. Obviously throw in Travis Kelce as well. Loving Patrick Mahomes. Tom Brady, $7,300, just continues to get the job done. Obviously no Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, but I think he'll be just fine with Mike Evans and Rob Gronkowski. He had a great week last week, and I think he can continue here versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who defensively, they have been okay versus the pass this year, kind of worse versus running backs, but they're still 21st versus the pass, despite being 12th in fantasy points allowed per game to the quarterback position. But we're talking about a guy that throws the ball around 40 times per game, 2.5 passing touchdowns, and well over 300 passing yards for his averages. So love Tom Brady with all of his pass catching options. Joe Burrow, $6,800. He ended the season quite nice, just absolutely killing it. Him and Jamar Chase and all of his pass catching options. And this is going to be a very popular stack. It's not that hard to do. Burrow is under 7K. Jamar Chase is not overly expensive. You have T. Higgins. You have CJ Uzomah. You want to get weird and throw in Tyler Boyd, you can certainly do that. Joe Mixon's below $7,000. Expect these Bengal stacks to be very, very popular. This game features a 49-point over-under, only a 5.5 point spread. I imagine it's going to be pretty back and forth for the most part. The Raiders' defense versus the pass this season has been pretty below average, ranking 25th DVOA, but they're kind of mid-pack when it comes to fantasy points allowed per game to the quarterback position. But the Bengals playing at home, burn their home crowd. I mean, I would not be surprised if they get their first playoff win since, the mid-90s. So I do like the Bengals stack quite a bit. And then getting pretty cheap here at quarterbacks. I think these guys are fine options. I'd say Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, more so in tournaments. Jalen Hurts, I think, is a fine cash game play if you are playing the full 6-game slate this weekend. But looking at Dak, had a fantastic end to this season. A lot of touchdowns, and the Cowboys look fantastic. Obviously facing the Eagles, who didn't really have much to play for there. It wasn't, I would say, a super important game or anything, but Dak looked good. He has a lot of pass catching options. Cedric Wilson, who had a fantastic game. Then you have Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, who has been kind of skidding a little bit, but we still know the talent is there. You have Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin returned. You have the running backs out of the backfield. I think Dak is a fine tournament play versus San Francisco. This game features a 50.5 point over-under and a 3-point spread, and they're playing at home, so lots to like about that game. I'd say more so in tournaments as far as the passing attack for the Cowboys go, but they're definitely in a decent spot. Matthew Stafford at $6,300. He's always a tournament quarterback for me. I don't mean you can't play him in cash games. I just mean he's always in play in tournaments for me because he's got Cooper Kupp to get the ball to. He's got his great pass catching weapons. It's the Rams offense. They're playing at home. Versus Arizona, this should be a very good game. Only a 4-point spread. and a total very close to 50. And then Jalen Hurts, $6,100. I'm thinking right now, if you are playing the full-on 6-game slate, I think he's your best cash game option because we love Jalen Hurts when he's going to be trailing in a game that he can kind of do his garbage time stuff, which I would say is quite possible in this game. They're 8.5-point dogs. They're on the road, 49-point over-under. And the Buccaneers defense is not that great versus quarterbacks. Like on the season, they're 8th DVOA versus the pass, which is pretty good. But they're also 26 versus fantasy quarterbacks. We know Jalen Hurts can use his legs, so it's really hard for him to fail. See in the season, he's averaging over 50 rushing yards per game and over half a rushing touchdown. So if he can just get us like 200 plus through the air with a touchdown or two and just a decent day on the ground, I have a hard time seeing him fail at $6,100. And I imagine they're playing catch up the entire time, and that's when Jalen Hurts plays his football for DFS purposes. So I do like Jalen Hurts a lot at that price point. And moving on to running backs, I wouldn't say it's super deep for me. And if you actually open up the DK page, it just looks like a red sea of injuries. Like almost every single running back has either an IR or a questionable tag right beside them. So I wouldn't say there's a ton of options I am loving, and obviously a lot of things can change based off of injury news. And one of these guys I have on here is on the IR, so not even sure if he's going to be 100% playing this weekend, although we did just get news that Fournette was designated to return like 12 seconds ago. I checked my phone. So that is good news. That doesn't mean he's 100% going to play, but at least he's eligible to come off the IR and play. If he does, hard not to like him at that price point. But we will start up top with Joe Mixon, just under 7K, which I think is a little bit too cheap for a guy that sees elite usage. He's on a good offense, facing a pretty bad Raiders run defense. And last time he played them, he had around 30-some touches and had a really good fantasy day, nearly 30 fantasy points. But they're 5.5-point favorites at home, 27.25 implied team total. And if you're looking at how the Raiders have performed versus fantasy running backs this season, they're allowing the 3rd most points per game despite being 9th DVA versus the run. So Joe Mixon, if you had the money for him, I love him. He's not like he's really expensive either. He's below $7,000. He's the most expensive running back on the slate too. So running backs are not that expensive. There's a lot of good wide receivers. So I understand if you want to go cheaper at running back just to afford those wide receivers. But I really do like Joe Mixon a lot. And a lot of people are going to be on the passing attack for the Bengals. So I'm hoping Mixon goes a little bit lower owned than he should, because obviously he's going to get first crack for touchdowns on the goal line, and he's going to get a lot of touches, probably 20 plus. So I'm loving Joe Mixon a lot. Najee Harris, he's an interesting tournament option. You know, 12.5-point dogs on the road in KC, so you have to assume he's going to get a lot of dump offs from Big Ben. Because when the Steelers are trailing, that's usually when we want Najee Harris, because we like those targets, because on a PPR slate DraftKings, they add up quite quickly. Last time he faced the Chiefs, he had 7 targets in that game. I know it's never really fun playing Najee because he's highly inefficient. Maybe you're just looking at his yards per carry this season, he's sitting below 4. But he gets over 5.5 targets per game and nearly 20 carries, so the usage is absolutely elite. And the Chiefs have not been that great versus the run. They are a below average run defense so far this season, whether you look at DVOA or fantasy points allowed per game. So Najee Harris, I think, is a fine option if you want to get off some chalk. Because if you are playing the 6-game slate, I would much rather try to find the extra $200 for Joe Mixon than I would Najee Harris, but I do think he is interesting. Leonard Fournette, $5,900. Like I mentioned, if he gets activated and he is playing and he returns to the role that he saw before he got injured with the hamstring injury, it's hard not to like him, because Fournette was absolutely killing it. Like each and every single week, he gets a ton of targets, really involved in the passing game, and he got the bulk of the carries. And below $6,000, facing Philly as an 8.5-point favorite at home, a team total close to 30 on the season, averaging around 13 carries and nearly 6 targets per game. But lately, those carries were definitely up, and they're going to be skewed a little bit from missing the past couple weeks and leaving the one game early. But Leonard Fournette, I would say, is almost like a better version of Najee Harris in terms of just being on a better offense and just being a little bit better with the touches that he receives. In the matchup versus Philly, they're currently 24th versus running backs this season, and they really struggle versus pass catching running backs, giving up nearly 7 catches per game, which is something Leonard Fournette obviously does quite well. Then Eli Mitchell at $5,500. So the Dallas defense has obviously been pretty good versus running backs this year, allowing the 3rd fewest points per game. They are 18th DVA versus the run, though. But Eli Mitchell's a guy that's going to get probably 20-plus touches, and he's only $5,500. And the 49ers offense, not like it's bad or anything. I mean, it's obviously a tough matchup when they're on the road and they're dogs, but it's only a 3-point spread, and they still have a team total close to 24 here. So if you're just looking for a back that gets a lot of volume for pretty cheap, only $5,500, I think Eli Mitchell is certainly in play. Not heavily used in the passing game or anything, but 20 touches is 20 touches, and that's a pretty nice price point. And moving on to the wide receiver position, we are absolutely loaded. I pretty much just left every single relevant wide receiver on this slate on the page. Now, I'm not going to talk about each and every single one, because that is going to be a complete waste of time. It really just comes down to which quarterback you're using or what you want your stacks to look like. If you are using Matthew Stafford, you play Cooper Kupp, and then you run it back with someone on the Cardinals. Now, it doesn't have to be a wide receiver. It can always be a tight end like Zach Ertz, but then you have A.J. Green, you have Wesley, you have Christian Kirk. If you are using a Bengals stack, obviously guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd are going to be very relevant to you, and you want to run it back with someone on the Raiders. You could use Darren Waller. You could use Hunter Renfrow, who is only $6,000. I think you guys get the idea here, but just to say how loaded it is, the first few wide receivers, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Deontay, like these are some of the best wide receivers in football. We're really just kind of missing Devontae Adams and maybe Justin Jefferson, but we are loaded up top. And just kind of correlate these guys as best as possible to your lineups. If you're using a Chiefs stack, Tyreek Hill is very cheap at $7,100. I'd be looking to take advantage of that. Last time he faced Pittsburgh, it went horrible. So maybe people stay away from that. Plus, he burned you last week if you played on week 7 or week 18. So I assume the ownership will be a little bit lower because of that. Only getting burned from the same player quite often, which Tyreek Hill is definitely doing that. But we always know he has that 40-point upside. If you're using Tom Brady, Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, is only $6,900. I think he is a fantastic option if you're stacking the Chiefs, like we just mentioned. Deontay Johnson as a run back option if you don't have Najee Harris or Pat Freiermuth. So lots of ways we can go. I mean, if you're looking at cheap guys, Cole Beasley for the Bills. If you just want cheap Bills exposure, you have Chase Claypool, who's a dirt cheap option for the Steelers, although he is highly unpredictable. I mean, it's really tough to get Chase Claypool right. Odell Beckham Jr. if you can't afford Cooper Kupp. I mean, there's just lots of options down here. I think that price on Christian Kirk is a little bit too low. It's obviously a tougher matchup versus the Rams, but there is no shortage of options to go on this slate, so I would say go crazy. My favorite wide receivers, maybe just basing it off price, I would say Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Hunter Renfrow stand out to me quite a bit, but all these guys are fantastic options and just kind of correlate them as best as possible to your stacks. And most of what I said for the wide receiver position can be applied to the tight end position because, again, pass catchers, so you want them correlated with your stacks as best as possible. Now, just to highlight a couple tight ends here, I love Rob Gronkowski. Once you take Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown off the field and you're left with Mike Evans and Gronk, the targets are just basically going to be shifted their way, and we've seen that. And Gronkowski had a great game last week. Now, got to get force fed at the end of the game to get his bonuses, but still it counts the same. But Philly has not been good versus tight ends this year. They're actually allowing the second most points per game to the position, and Gronk has been quite busy this year, and I don't see how he's not going to have a great game here. So I do like Gronk quite a bit. If you're going in the middle, I like Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert because I do like stacking that Philly-Tampa Bay game up. And if you're using Jalen Hurts, I think Goddard is really the only viable option. Yes, you can use Devonta Smith, but it's really hard to project him. Like, yes, the guy's a fantastic player, but the way he's been used this year, it's not been, like, pretty for DFS purposes. Like, he does have those random good games, but I'm not really a big fan of Devonta Smith when it comes to fantasy. But I do like Dallas Goedert a lot at $4,500, who definitely is the go-to guy for Jalen Hurts. And if you're looking down low, CJ Uzomah at $3,200, he's projecting very well for me. Like, point per dollar wise, he is right up there with Gronk as being the best point per dollar option. Gronk's projected very highly for me, but CJ Uzomah is only $3,200. He's half the price as Gronk, based on the Raiders who have not been good versus tight ends this year. And we're talking about a guy that is on the field a lot. He's averaging around 4 targets per game and a 12.5% target share, which is not bad for a guy of his price point on a team that has been very good offensively, and they have a 27-point implied team total. So I think Uzomah is a great value play if you're looking to spend up elsewhere on this slate. But if you're not looking to spend all the way down, there's a lot of good tight ends like Kelsey, Gronk, Kittle, Waller, Schultz, who's been amazing. Even though Blake Jarwin's back, Schultz is still going to be the guy. Just many, many good options. But again, try to correlate as best as possible. If you are playing cash games, for me, it's between Gronk or CJ Uzomah as of right now. And as far as the defenses go, I'm not going to really nitpick about it. Whoever fits at the end, just throw them in. But if you're looking at some of my favorite defenses, I just basically have the favorites here. So the Buccaneers versus Philly. But I do like Jalen Hurts a lot, so I'm not really going to go on my way to play Tampa. But they are 8.5-point favorites at home, so I totally understand it. The Chiefs, I assume, will be the most popular. They have the lowest implied team total against them at 17. 12.5-point favorites. They're playing at home. It's Arrowhead. It's the playoffs. It's going to be a tough place to play. And Big Ben's always good for some turnovers and sacks. The Bills versus the Patriots game, that is supposed to be like frigid cold. I read 20, 30 degrees below freezing. So definitely a boost for the defense. It's only a 44-point over-under, which is the lowest of any game of the playoffs in Week 19. So I think these defenses will be popular just because of that. And if you can't afford the Bills, I don't mind playing the Patriots either, even though I don't like picking on the Bills offense. The Cowboys, they project the best for me, facing the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, the 49ers still have a good offense. Obviously, George Kittle, Eli Mitchell, and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. But the Cowboys defense is really, really good. They're playing at home. I know it's a 50.5 point over-under, which is the highest on the slate, but the defense is definitely very talented. They can still get the job done. Rams defense, just because they're a cheaper favorite, and we already talked about the Patriots. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. But I do think this is a very fun slate. You can make some really, really fun lineups, especially in tournaments, because there's a lot of great stacks on this slate. So I definitely think it'll be a fun one. Plus, you have 3 days to sweat out for the playoffs, which if you are playing the full 6-game slate, I do think it is a pretty fun way to go. But if you did find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, I'm an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, all that fun stuff you know where to find. Not just for the NFL, but the NBA, which is going on currently, which I cover every single night. NASCAR next month, coming very, very shortly, and then baseball in a few months. So a lot to be excited about. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. And as of right now, when you sign up for there, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant match up to $100. Use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. That'll be it. I'll get out of here, and I wish you all the best of luck this weekend.